Look, single-handedly, the best way in order to improve font rendering on Linux and specifically on Hyprland is to just switch your font completely. Now, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive because you're trying to improve font rendering, but then you're switching the font itself. Like, how the hell does that work? You might be thinking. Well, I'll tell you exactly how. Now, first of all, by default, look what happens, okay? So by default, what's going to happen is that you have another font selected, probably something like Noto Sans. Okay, by default, you're probably going to have a font like Noto Sans Regular, or maybe a font like Cantarell. Okay, if your setup is actually a bit older than you normally would have these days, okay? Now, if you've reinstalled your setup in the last probably 1 to 2 to 3 months, the font that you're going to have by default is called Advaita Sans. Advaita Sans, right? This is the font that you'll have by default. And if I select this font, it looks fine, all that well and good, but it doesn't look as good as it can possibly look. And keep in mind, by the way, this is with all of the other font tweaks that I'm going to show you how to install, like specifically. Okay? Now, with that in mind, Advaita Sans Regular actually looks like a pretty good font. Not to mention also that I have set the font size specifically to 11.5 because there's something that I've noticed in my over 4 years of writing Hyperland, okay? It's that it doesn't matter what application it is, okay? It can either be NWG Look, or it can be your terminal, or it can be VS Codium, basically any single app, okay? Now what happens is, due to the nature of fonts and how they work, okay, sometimes when you select certain sizes of particular fonts, they just end up clicking. Like you can feel the font click when it aligns with the grid of pixels that are on your display, okay? The grid of pixels that consist your display, right? When this font aligns perfectly with that grid, you'll feel that the font just clicks. Now, if I show you right now, this is 11.5, right? Let's take SF Pro Text as an example. It's a bit of a tangent, but it's a useful tangent nonetheless, okay? Let's say I pick SF Pro Text Regular. This is the font that I have by default. Okay, now let's say the font is at size 10, okay? Now you see it looks very small and it doesn't look very clear at all. The text is fringed a lot on the sides and basically it just doesn't look like a good font. I can increase the size to 11, a little bit better. The fringing at the edges of the font has been reduced. I can increase it to 12, but then this just happens to look a little bit too big. Now watch what happens when I switch from 12 to 11.5. It's like it just reduces the font size just enough to keep it looking clean and visible without having too many fringes at the edges of the characters, right? That, whilst also keeping the font not too small, like you saw when it came to 10. Font quality just dramatically reduces when you reduce it to 10, but not the same when it comes to 11.5. It's the perfect middle ground when it comes to a font size and the font quality between 11 and 12, right? That specifically works for SF Pro Text. Now, different fonts click at different sizes, so you'll have to figure out where exactly that click lies for any particular font I'm going to show you, but the general principle lies the same. You want to look for the click as much as possible. Same thing goes for JetBrains Mono, okay? I'll just show you JetBrains Mono in just a second, and after that we can go to how exactly you're supposed to install these fonts. I'll show you the exact step-by-step because I used to struggle with fonts and whatnot a lot when I was originally starting out Rising Hyperland. Now, again, 4 years of Rising Hyperland has definitely given me enough chances at making fonts look better enough that they can look as good as this, right? So it is what it is. Now let's go to config kitty so I can show you how font rendering works here. Now, let's switch to a more standard font that most of you are most likely to be using, probably something like JetBrains Mono. And if you're wondering what this mono is about, by the way, this JetBrains Mono Nerd Font Mono is one of the variants of the JetBrains Mono Nerd Font, okay? Now, this has multiple variants. This font itself, any nerd font really, has multiple variants. You have either the base variant without a mono or a propo, you have mono, and then you have propo. I've made a video on it in the past, so if you want to know what it is in more detail, you can go ahead and check it out. And whilst you're at it, you can also go ahead and click the first link in the description and check out this, a custom theme switcher, which I show you exactly how to make properly so that you don't have to waste any time whatsoever. So basically, there's a list of themes that you can pick from where all you have to do is just select whichever is your favorite theme, and the entirety of your system adapts to that specific theme. Now, let's say I pick a theme like Rosé Pine. Okay, now here what I can do is I can open any fetch program. Let's say I have NeoFetch. Okay, let's just get NeoFetch. Let's get NeoFetch here, and then let's show you how this actually works. The theme switching in action. So let's open NeoFetch. This is what you see, right? I'll clear the screen. Ta-da, this is what you see. Now, if I open VS Codium, okay, that's probably another app that you're going to be using. This is what you see. And also, let's open another app, probably something like Discord. Okay, so we have, okay, it hasn't been configured yet, but you get the drill, okay? Now, this is VS Codium, and this is the NeoFetch, the app itself. Now watch what happens. Let's also open File Manager for good measure. Okay, these three apps are whatever we have here. Now watch what happens when I switch the theme from one theme to the other. Let's say I pick something like Noir. Okay, this is more of a mono kind of theme, monochrome kind of theme that actually is supposed to get out of your way whilst using pastel colors so that you can feel more productive and not be distracted by all of the colors. Okay, this is what you see. Now I can also switch to a theme like Cappuccino. Ta-da! The theme is applied to VS Codium as well as Thunar as well as the terminal as well. So if you want to know how to make this without wasting a single second of your time and basically getting a structured path, a structured system as to how to do this without having to jump through 50 different loopholes from YouTube to Medium to Reddit to GitHub to wherever the hell you can find information on Hyperland Rising, you can go ahead and click the first link in the description. I will be honored to teach you how this stuff works because I've been there. I've been in the same situation that you are. Probably a beginner to an intermediate Linux user, right? Hyperland user who really wants to configure his setup, his or her setup, in order to get it looking as good as it can, but then just doesn't know how exactly to go about doing it. Chances are you're probably just like me in the sense that you don't know what you don't know, right? There's this thing called ignorance debt, okay? Where basically, let's take a monetary example to make it completely clear, okay? If you're not already making $1 million a year, it's costing you, let's say you make $50,000 a year, it's costing you $950,000 in order to basically make $1 million a year. And that 950,000 is what we call ignorance debt. Now it's the same thing when it comes to Rising Hyperland. You want to know how to get a beautiful Hyperland setup like this, but then the thing is, you don't have the knowledge in order to do that. Now, how you actually go about paying off that ignorance debt is by just learning more. Now you can either do it the free way, which is what I did, or you can just take the easy step-by-step structured learning path so that you don't have to listen to 20 different voices with 20 different philosophies at the same time. If you want to know how to do that, first link in the description, go ahead, check it out. Okay, now let's just, where was I? Okay, let's change this to 11 because I just really want to show you how this font clicking thing works. And after we do that, I can show you how to actually install the font. Okay, here, as you can see, the font is a bit too small. I can change it to something like 12. And, you know, it's a little better, but then watch what happens as soon as I change it to 13, okay? 13 is when this JetBrains Mono Nerd font clicks. So if I press Ctrl Shift F5, you see what happens? It's basically the same size, but then it's been expanded vertically. All the letters and the characters have been expanded vertically. So if I show you, again, 12, this is what 12 looks like. It feels like the font has been squished down from the top and bottom, right? Let's go back to 13, and then let's reload. Ta-da! As you can see, the font clicks, and we have superb, fantastic font rendering. Great. Now let me actually show you how you can install the fonts to get the best experience. So we have to open a browser for that first of all. So let's open Brave. Let's go to fonts.google.com. Okay. Google Fonts is going to be your one-stop shop, one-stop destination to get the best fonts when it comes to sans serif fonts, which are the fonts that you're going to use for UIs. Okay, you can pick the most popular one, Roboto. This is what Android uses by default. Okay, if you're not using Pixel, a Google Pixel, which uses Google Sans, you're most likely using Roboto. So you can pick that, or you can scroll down here and you can add a bunch of filters, right? You can select the feeling, which you can set it to business. So this is what you see, right? This font looks pretty good, actually. Zalando Sans. Okay, seems like a font that a SaaS business would use. So let's actually just go ahead and download it so I can show you what it looks like. Okay, or let me use a font that's proven, like absolutely proven to have good font rendering, which is Rubik. If I show you Rubik, okay, this is what Rubik looks like. This is the font that's used in End4's setup, if you've seen that before. Okay, let's click on Get Font. You can click on Download All, but if you're on Arch Linux, chances are Rubik is a TTF that you can find inside of the AUR. So here, should see TTF Rubik, which is Rubik typeface. So we'll just install that. So we'll just type in I TTF Rubik. And if you're wondering what this I is all about, it's basically an alias in ZSH. So what aliases are basically just substitutes. So you can actually configure ZSH or bash or whichever shell that you use in order to substitute yay-s for I, or I for yay-s actually. So whenever I type I, it basically means install, which is going to yay-s TTF Rubik. So we'll just install this. Okay, seems like this TTF file is not going to install properly, so that's fine. That's really no problem. Let's actually show you how to manually install this. So we'll click on download all, and we'll put this inside of, let's say, documents. Okay, let's just put that in there, and let's cd into documents, cd documents. We'll go in here and let's unzip. Okay, we'll unzip rubik.zip. And we don't have unzip, so we'll just have to get that. Unzip is a pretty simple package, as you can probably guess, used to unzip zip files. So just unzip that, and you should see a variable font weight. Now this is something that this is a pattern that you're going to notice in lots of font files, okay? You have variable font files, and then you have static font files. So if I ls static, you should see that there are a bunch of different TTF files over here with all different font faces. But when it comes to variable fonts, you have all the different faces just stored in a single font file. It's kind of like a UKI. So if you've installed Arch Linux using Arch install, it's going to give you an option for using unified kernel images. Now, what is a unified kernel image? Well, let me actually show you what that is. So let's go to boot loader, or actually boot EFI loader. We should see the kernel image somewhere here. Entries. Okay, it's not here, but it should be in EFI. Let's say Linux. Yep, this. So this .efi file is basically a unified kernel image, which contains the kernel and then a bunch of other stuff that's required in order to boot it. Now, by default, if you don't use UKIs, if you don't use a unified kernel image, there's going to be multiple different files that are going to have to be loaded sequentially, or basically loaded by the computer in order to start it up, right? Now, instead of that, you can just combine all of those files into a single one, which is a unified kernel image. That's the same thing we're doing over here when it comes to variable fonts. Okay, so we're taking all of these font faces, we're stuffing them inside one variable font weight file, right? One variable font file, and that's going to be this file that you see here. Now, let's actually move this to a specific location so that we can get started with using these fonts. Two ways that you can do this. You can either do this on a system level, so that no matter what user you are on, you can actually access the font file itself, okay? Or you can do it on a per user level. So this font, let's say I configured it to be on a per user level. If I switch to a user like user 1, I would no longer be able to access this font. Okay, now I'll show you how to do both. So if you want to do the per user method, which doesn't actually require root permissions, you have to move the font files to .local share fonts ttf and then whatever the font name is. Okay, so let's actually create that so you can see how the flow works. Local share fonts ttf, and here we'll call this Rubik. Okay, now you want to use -p flag. If you use the -p flag with mkdir, what happens is it creates any missing directories along the way. We have some missing directories, actually 3 of them. So it just creates the missing directory so that we don't have to type in 3 different commands to create them. Okay, so we have this directory. Now all we need to do is just cp. Okay, we can just copy everything ending in .ttf, because look, inside of the documents folder, we only have these 2 TTF files. We're not dealing with anything else, only these 2 true type font files. So we'll copy everything in .ttf over to .local share fonts ttf Rubik. Okay, so we'll just copy this over there, and now if I open nwg look, and if I click here, if I search for the font file Rubik, as you can see, it shows up immediately. Now watch what happens. Even compared to SF Pro Text, okay? Now this font is actually looks super clean on this setup, but regardless, if I just select Rubik regular, and then I hit select, like, do you see exactly just how good this font looks? Like, it looks fucking amazing. Genuinely. I can change the font size, and despite that, the font still retains its weight. It's not like it loses its weight and then becomes extremely frail and flimsy, but no, this thing's fat. This thing, it's an amazing font, which is why I suggested that you pick it. If you did pick this font, good choice. It works. It works fantastically well. Okay, now we'll actually keep this until the rest of this video just to show you how good this font is. You can close this and reopen the browser. Okay, and this is what Rubik looks like. Even in the URL bar of Brave, which is supposed to have supposedly the worst font rendering that I've come across in my years of writing Hyprland, this looks pretty damn sexy. It's amazing. Okay, now, how exactly are you supposed to do this on a system level? Well, same thing. You just create a bunch of folders, copy the font files into the folders, and then you're set. Now, on a system level, what you're supposed to do is this, okay? You create a new directory, but because you're on Arch, this might differ from distro to distro, but basically on Arch, it's mkdir-p user local share fonts. That's the font file location, font folder location. So user local share fonts, TTF, you want to create Rubik. Here, of course, permission denied, so you'll just have to use sudo. Okay, now sudo cp, everything ending in .ttf. The asterisk is the wildcard character, by the way. So just ignore whatever text comes before .ttf. If any file ends in .ttf, just copy that. You want to copy all that to user local share fonts ttf Rubik. Copy that over there, and you should basically see the same behavior. Doesn't matter if you log into a different user, you should still be able to access it. Sometimes what happens is certain system level applications, they don't actually recognize the font that's inside of your local directory. So sometimes you'll just have to push this to a system-wide directory so that every single font or every single app can access it. Sometimes the root user, you probably want your root applications to be customized as well, right? So instead of having to deal with ugly root apps, because by default, root apps are pretty goddamn ugly. If I show you, if I just type in Thunar, yeah, this is what you see. Light mode hell, okay? Font doesn't look too bad because it's light mode, but regardless, this is not how a root app is supposed to look like. Doesn't matter how, doesn't matter how less that you use it, right? So helps with fixing that. But yeah, that is basically the main way in which you're supposed to improve font rendering. After that, there are a couple of other little minor tweaks that we can do. If you just click on font over here, you want to make sure font hinting is set to slight. Sometimes if you see too much fringing basically means this purpley stuff at the edges of characters on a font. So if you see too much of that, you might want to turn hinting to slight. Hinting basically refers to mathematical instructions that are added in order to make a font align to a display's pixel grid. Okay, basically a bunch of tech jargon for make this font align to a grid. That's it. So if you don't want too much of fringing, if you don't want the font to become too purpley, you can just reduce that to none. Especially for this font, like it's thick, it works, you don't need that much font hinting for it, so it's perfect. Now anti-aliasing, that's basically just adding a bunch of extra stuff at the edges of characters, extra pixels that are of different varying opacities and colors in order to reduce the jagged edges that you see on text that you want to set to RGBA. Okay, 99.99% of the time, dude, you're going to have this set to RGBA. Then when it comes to RGBA order, this is going to be RGB as well, because most displays, they are RGB. You set that text scaling factor, you let that be the same, and then that's pretty much all that you have to do. That is how you can get fonts looking as good and as crisp as this. Now, there's one last thing that I want to show you as a bonus, which is going to be my font config file. So if I go to config, font config, here we have fonts.conf, and we have a backup file, and then we have conf.d. So in conf.d, we have font tuning. Now this is actually for foot. Yeah, this is for foot, which is a terminal, foo terminal. Let's show you the main font config file. So here, we're basically using font config, which is another way to edit font rendering. We're just using that in order to set the same things that we set for NWG look earlier. Anti-aliasing true, hinting true, hint style, hint slight, RGBA yes, RGB, auto hint false, LCD filter. Now this is a bit more advanced stuff which you can look up yourself, but you can just copy the settings that I have if you want the same text that I have. Okay, RGBA is RGB, hinting yes, 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 yes. That's it. Done. And this is a directory in which you're going to look for fonts. So .local share fonts. And also inside of .fonts. Now chances are the .local share fonts directory is not actually going to work for you unless you have this specific setting in font config. So make sure you add this. But of course, I've already shown you how you can add it on a system level. So even if it doesn't work, you're still covered. And that's it. If you want to know how to make a custom theme switcher like this one, without having to spend any time looking for tutorials, okay, instead of actually writing, then go ahead, click the first link in the description, and I would love to help you out. If you liked the video, hit like. If you loved it and want to see more like this in your feed, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Stay rising.